podcast with Michael Roper here, and this is episode number 502. So welcome to our podcast. Today's episode is going to be about the art and science of BAS estimating, and this is part 2, a continuation of an episode that I did, I think a couple months ago. Now, all the information that I'm covering today can be found on our SBA website. So if you go into your web browser, type in podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com/502. You'll be able to rewatch or re-listen to this podcast whenever you like to. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the overview of this podcast. So in this episode, like I said, it's going to be a continuation of the previous podcast. I know it's been a little bit of a delay in between. I've been really busy in the background working on a new IT course that I've been creating and developing there, and then wrapping up a couple of my live classes from the spring. So it gives me an opportunity now. I got a little bit of time to focus on doing this podcast. Now, today, what we're going to do is we're going to go over some estimating strategies. We're going to go a little bit deeper than we did before with that, and how to get accurate estimating. All right, that's our goal in these strategies. We'll also cover some new tools and trends that's available on the market today. Probably some newer things that was available when I started estimating over 20 years ago. So we'll get into that a little bit. We'll also talk about scope volatility. So there's, as you all might be aware, the estimating world and controls is very volatile. There's a lot of changes taking place. A lot of things are done on a very quick time frame. So we'll talk about that and some tips on how to address that. And then I'll also get into some field lessons, some hard-earned lessons that I've learned out in the field from estimating. And we'll go ahead and relay that to you. And really, as you're going through this, if you're new to estimating, this is going to be valuable to you. Even if you're a seasoned professional, hopefully you might learn something in this episode too as well. If you have any tips or any questions, feel free to comment. If you're watching on LinkedIn or YouTube, feel free to make a comment, and we'd like to hear from you. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in, and let's go ahead and get to our first topic we're going to talk about, and that's going to be estimating strategy. All right. Now, in our original episode, we laid out the basics. Okay, the basics of doing an estimate. When you do, the spec review, you do the plans. You could go through the plans. You do labor estimating and subcontractor coordinating. All right. Now, estimating, like we see on that first bullet point, is your first chance to shape profitability. All right. So a good estimate is going to help you maintain your profits, all right, and your goals within your office. Now, on the strategic level, estimating is just not a task. Okay. It's your first chance to do that. Now, there's 3 strategic questions that we need to ask ourselves before you even open the drawings, before you even start doing a takeoff. Okay, we need to be aware of these things. Okay, what's the project intent is our first bullet here. Okay, there's several different types of estimates, I guess you could say. Is it going to be a performance estimate? Okay, now performance means the customer is expecting, their building to perform better than it is right now. Okay, this could be a performance contract. Okay, that's, if you guys don't know what that is, that's basically where you get a baseline of energy cost, and you get 3 years of energy bills. You take the average of that, whatever kilowatt usage or whatever gas and BTUs they're using. And then what you're going to do is you're going to evaluate how much money you can save them over a certain time frame. And whatever savings you save the customer from their baseline, usually the controls company gets that as their profit. Okay. So that's a performance, or the customer could just be expecting their building to decrease energy without a performance contract, or they might want more safety features or something like that or whatever performance they need as far as that goes. Okay, so that's performance. Maybe they're expecting performance. Maybe it could be cost. This is a big one, and this is what a lot of our jobs are, is cost. Sometimes the customer just wants the cheapest price they can get for the best value, all right? So you got to keep that in consideration too when we're doing that. When it comes to cost, you might want to start, if the customer might not have the budget to do everything all at once, and it's a negotiated job, you might want to do alternate ads. Okay, maybe you want to break out the air handlers first and do the plant at a later time, or break out the plant because it's going to go out of budget. right? So there's just some things you could do to help the customer with cost. Speed is another one. And this mainly deals a lot of times when we have service projects. I mean, how fast can we get this thing up and running? We have an air handler down, or we just had a remodel and we need to relocate some sensors or something like that. How fast can you get out to get this fixed? Okay, so speed could be another factor of the project. Okay, then our last one's going to be like integration. Maybe you have a customer that's had a system, for 15 years and it's time to upgrade their system, and they're wanting to go to a different vendor or something like that, and there's integration involved, or they have an old protocol that they want to get to a more modern protocol like BACnet. Okay, so this would be an example of an integration project. Okay, another one we need to ask ourselves is, what kind of job are we bidding? And who's going to be the players? Who's going to be the people that we're selling this to? Is it going to be the GC? Is it a GC driven job? This is a lot of our plan and spec jobs, and this is going to require us to go by the plans and specs as our guideline. And our customer, usually for a controls contractor, is going to be the mechanical contractor, and then they're going to be the customer of the general contractor. Okay, so the GC will be getting the price from the mechanical, and the mechanical is going to be getting the price from us for the controls. Okay, so that's a GC driven job. That's going to be plan and spec. Owner direct is going to be like our retrofits. All right. So this is whenever we don't have a GC involved. We might not even have a mechanical contractor involved. I've done this a lot of times, and these are actually one of my favorite jobs because we can actually define the scope of work and all those rules. So direct to the owners, like our retrofit project. And then we have the design build. Design build is kind of like a hybrid between a plan and spec and an owner direct, because we're working hand in hand with like a design engineer and the building owner to help them design what they need. And that's where we're using our controls expertise to help the engineer and the owner. Now, we also need to be aware of the risk. Okay, this is a big deal right here. Unfamiliar systems. Okay, maybe your office has not ever done a BACnet integration before from Lawn Talk or something like that. There could be vague sequence of operation. Maybe it's a very complex air handler with an energy wheel and it's got all these bells and whistles on it. Or it might be missing pieces of it. That, a supply discharge reset on an air handler is missing parts of the sequence or something like that. Okay. So vague sequences is another example there. Tight timelines is another one. Okay. So maybe there's a risk that this project has to be done very quickly. So that means you might have to be working after hours. So that means we're going to have to start charging time and a half or double time or overtime for your technicians. You might have to factor that into your cost. If you don't do that, then that's a big risk item right there, and you can lose money on labor. Okay. So strategic awareness changes your pricing and also your risk management. For example, I saw one time when I was doing a takeoff, this real world risk example here. This was buried very deep into the specifications and the sequence. Nobody could hardly see it. It was like demand-based ventilation control, where we had to have for 8 rooms in a school. And if we didn't catch that, we not only would have had to pay for the material cost on the CO2 sensors, which are very costly sensors, by the way, and you have to pay for 8 of those. Think about all the programming and startup and graphics and software configuration. All that time for 8 sensors adds up a lot. So just making sure that we understand the sequence and reading every single line in the sequence will help us eliminate some risk items there. Okay. All right, so let's go on the pricing complexity. So too often estimators just use part counts, okay, and labor hours from old jobs. All right. Those are not very accurate estimates, obviously. I've seen this a lot. They call them shotgun estimates, or they just like a swag. They're just doing based on rules of thumb. And these aren't really accurate ways to do estimates. That's how you lose jobs a lot, because you overestimate, and that's how you lose money on the actuals after the job is being in progress, because you didn't estimate enough. So really an accurate estimate helps out a lot down the road. So we live in a world of like protocol mashups. If you look at buildings today, sometimes you might have a legacy control system that has proprietary communications on it, and it can't talk to anything else but its own vendor. Or you might have a lawn talk building that was really popular in the 2000s. And then today, everybody's going towards BACnet. It seems like BACnet over IP mainly, and a lot of times BACnet MSTP. All right. Maybe even a Modbus type of job too as well. You might see some of those. All right. So we need to be aware of those and make sure that we can integrate properly, and you have the expertise in-house to do that as well. We also see a lot of cloud-based systems, okay, with the popularity of AI coming into the game. You're going to see a lot more cloud-based systems as far as putting your user interface on and accessing building automation systems. So you're going to have your technicians trained and have the expertise on how to interface with those systems too as well. If not, you're going to have to subcontract that out to somebody that can. All right, so we have some installation factors that we could talk about. Here's a couple of examples here. So we have a VAV job with static pressure reset. So when we look at that, it's just not one controller per box. You also have to factor labor, okay, commissioning, graphics, what else? Startup and checkout. There could be air balance coordination, where you're going to have to go with the test and balance agent, and drive open your dampers and close them to make sure that they're getting the proper CFM and airflow. Often zone level tweaks, you'll have to do that too as well. Maybe there's an offset on a zone sensor, so you might have to do that. Now, sometimes you might have built-in auto commissioning in your software, and that can help out a lot too. So it just depends on the vendor that you rep and the software tools they have. Could save you some time. If you have to manually do it, obviously that's going to take a lot more time. Now, integration, I kind of talked about this already. Okay, so BACnet over IP, MSTP, you're going from a BACnet job or a Modbus to a BACnet or a lawn talk. So you need to be aware of that. Your in-house technicians need to be aware of like firewall rules, being able to talk to the IT professionals at the job site and so on. Okay. So some solutions that we can do with pricing complexity, and this really kind of talks about, labor templates and things like that, is, you have tiers here, and I have a vanilla. Now, vanilla means like a very basic project, okay? And if you think about the pricing complexity, you're going to have projects, that might, just have like 3 air handlers and 50 VAVs. That might be a small job. You might have, double that might be intermediate, and then triple it or more might be a complex job. Okay. Now you're going to have different labor factors in here for project management, for project engineering, for administration. Okay. The longer a project has to go on, the more time's going to be spent by admin, the more time's going to be spent by the project management team to make sure they stay on top of it. And then it's going to take a little bit longer to engineer these jobs too as well. Because you're going to have to go through more plans, more specs. The submittals are going to be more to put together, and so on. So you might have, for a vanilla job, for these kind of overhead items here, you might have to have like, maybe 4 to 6 hours, for a PE, and then double that, and then triple it for a complex. Now, the complexity multipliers depends really on the skill level of your office. All right. So for a technician to start up an air handler, just a basic constant volume air handler might take, 2 hours for a seasoned veteran, just to go through all the checkpoints, troubleshoot if they need to, and do some basic things, do a point-to-point checkout list. Now, someone that's new on the job, or if you're having a high turnover, you need to take that into consideration. You might have to double that time for a basic air handler, and so on. So your labor factors per piece of equipment or per size of the project can vary based on office experience. So what I'd recommend, and what I used to do, is, as an estimator, I would interview the project manager and the technicians just to kind of get a feel for how long it takes them, usually to put together an air handler, or how to start up and check out an air handler, how long it takes them to do graphics and so on, because it could differ from company to company and vendor to vendor. So it's really important to interview your in-house team and stay on top of how long it's taken them to do these items here. And then you can use that information to as settings within your estimate templates. Okay. Another thing that we need to be aware of is, non-billable task. Okay. Things that have to be done. I guess they are going to be billable at the end of the day, but these are things that have to be done, like RFIs. Okay. These are surprises. So the engineer's doing a takeoff, and there's something very vague in the spec. Now they're going to have to do a request for information to the design engineer. Then they're going to have a conversation with them, maybe have to go to a meeting with them, go to their office and meet with them, go on the phone and talk to them. That all takes time out of the PE's day that they can be working on something else. So we got to factor that in to our estimate to make sure that's part of it. Submittal revisions. Okay, maybe you get a submittal that's rejected. Now the PE has to go back and fix whatever was rejected and order more material if it was a wrong part or whatever it may be. Could also be programming. Okay, you might have to do some kind of reprogramming if a sequence was not correct on the design, or if it's not working and it needs to be adjusted a little bit. Okay. Also, whenever you see that a system is backnet over IP to the supervisory, but MSTP at the field, and they want to integrate like a Modbus boiler controller, and, just don't think it's just the same protocol. We need to make sure that we're aware that we might have to switch protocols if it's a different type of protocol in the boiler control panel. Okay. Also, be aware of license costs too as well. A lot of times today in our controllers, you have to also add in the cost of a license per controller as well. Okay, let's do I'm just going to do a quick estimate walkthrough of a real world situation here. And it's not going to be real detailed. I'm just going to do a high level overview. If I was going to do a high level overview, that would probably take maybe 1 to 2 hours. So if you're interested more in learning more about controls estimating in detail, check out our website. We got some great courses there in sales and estimating. So let's go ahead and get into this one. So in this scenario, we got a 5-story office building. Okay. We got 3 air handlers and we got 50 VAV boxes. So we probably got about 10 VAVs per floor or something like that. And then it looks like we have a boiler, a plant that has 2 boilers, and we got 2 chillers, and we want this to be backnet over IP. And we also want to have cloud graphics. Okay. So this is some of the requirements that we got from the spec and the plan. So we kind of just wrapped it up right here just to kind of show you what we do there. Now, the flow and the way it goes is we're going to go through the drawings and the sequence review. So we need to understand, is it just control the units, or is there also additional work that we have to do, like integrate to the fire smoke interface? Maybe we have to backnet into our supervisor controller from the fire control system to get an alarm and then shut down our air handlers. I've seen that a lot. Sometimes you'll see that. Maybe we got to integrate to the access control, or maybe even the lighting control system. A lot of times when you're working on performance agreements, you're going to see lighting controls in there because that's usually the first thing they're going to do, because it's the easiest to retrofit. All right. Also, when we're going through these project requirements, is there like any specialized sequences or economizer cycles that we need to be aware of? Okay. Once we get into the takeoff, we need to just kind of gather our controllers, the pricing on the controllers first. So we got, 50 VAV boxes. That's going to be 50 VAV controllers. And then we also want to make sure we include all sensors on that. So what I used to do too, when I was in the field or estimating, is put together a points list. Okay. So points, you have all your hardware points that's associated with each one of these pieces of equipment. And then you can use that points list to make a scope of work for your electrical subcontractor and let them know which field points they have to wire and which factory points they don't have to wire. A lot of times you'll see in this modern world, a lot of equipment manufacturers will factory mount sensors to the controller. Okay, so be aware of what's factory and what's field. Do not double up. If you double up on an item and you have an electrician do something that's factory, you're pricing yourself out of the job, potentially. Okay. So same thing with the air handlers and the boilers and the chillers. Go through the plans and also the sequence and develop a points list of all the hardware points, all the inputs and outputs that has to be wired back to the controller. Okay. Also, if there's any kind of networks, if there's any switches that you have to provide, make sure you pick those up and make sure you abide by the requirements on those as well. If there's any gateways, maybe it's an MSTP, or it's a backnet to LAN talk gateway or something like that, or a cloud router, you might have to have something like that. A lot of times the customer is going to provide the switches and the routers, but if it's in our scope of work, just make sure you follow the requirements of the spec. All right, next we have labor, and we kind of talked about labor a little bit already, as far as experience level of your office. So we got programming. This is, could be a very complex, it could be a very basic program. A lot of times you can reuse programs. So if you have a project that's a basic constant volume air handler, chances are your office might already have that program. So you can reuse that program or just modify the program to fit the need of a specialized project if you have to. Okay. So that's one thing we could do. Also, IT coordination. We need to coordinate with IT. That needs to be included in your estimate too as well. That's something that's left out a lot. So don't leave out IT coordination if you have these IP jobs. Also, I put on here, like, if you're, you might do control panel fabrication, in your office or, any kind of wiring like that. But if you can get a quote for that to get it subcontracted out, what the price is going to be every time. And that you could sub it out and get it maybe done cheaper than you can do it in-house and also quicker too as well. Okay. As far as like templates here, I have another thing for templates, and that's for labor. And like I said before, depending on the experience level of your office technician or your technicians in your office, it might take longer or less depending on their experience. So, 1 hour per VAV, and maybe like 6 hours for each plant, okay, to do something like that. But that's really going to be based on how advanced your technicians are in their experience level, okay? And just get that feedback like I talked about. Interview your technicians, interview the project manager. That's how you get accurate estimates. That's how you get within 2% accuracy, okay, of the actuals. Subcontractors, it's really important to get multiple quotes, okay? And verify responsibilities. That's really important to verify the responsibilities. That's why whenever I used to do I used to request quotes from my electrical subcontractors, I used to give them a scope of work. I'd already have the scope of work typed out before I even gave it to my electrician for a subcontract. Okay, that's the control scope. Then I'd also give them a points list on an Excel spreadsheet of all the hardwired points they have to wire. Okay, so they know, because a lot of times they go on quantities, okay, of, open plenum versus exposed wiring, as far as that goes, as conduit. Okay. Verify responsibilities and also give them scope of work. That's really important. Sometimes you might, on retrofit projects, definitely take them out to the job site and walk them around, because a lot of times you're not going to have plans and they're not going to know where things are at. And if they don't know where things are at, they're going to go ahead and put some contingency on that, and it's going to make their price go up even higher. So, and that's another good point here, is the more information you have for your subcontractor, the better the estimate's going to be, especially when you get 3 quotes, okay? Because they know they're going to be bidding against somebody else, okay? And we want competitive quotes because we have to be competitive. If we're not competitive as a controls estimator, we're not going to win jobs. So that's the bottom line on that. And that's how you get good tight estimates, is you get complete detailed scope of works to your subcontractors. Okay. Now let's talk about something that sometimes people get confused on, and I did too for the longest time when I was estimating. And we're going to talk about margin versus markup. I know I have markup first, but we'll just go ahead and talk about markup. And this is what's going to be, markup is what the amount that's going to be added to your cost to arrive at a selling price. Okay, it's just our basic thing. This is what we add to the cost. So the cost is plus markup times cost. Okay, so our markup on this example, so if we have a cost on a project that's $1,000, okay, that's our cost of labor and material and anything else that's within our estimate. We want to apply a 25% markup. Okay, we want to mark this thing up 25%. Well, all we do is take 1,000 times 1.25, and that gives us a total sale price of 1,250. Okay, that's just our basic markup. This is used a lot in controls estimates. Okay, just basic things here. Now, you'll see a lot of offices, and your office might operate on margin. Okay, this is also called gross profit margin. Okay, if you want to really get detailed about it. And this is the percentage of the selling price that is profit. Okay, this is the percentage of it. Okay, this is what you keep after the sale. All right, so the formula for this is the selling price minus the cost divided by the selling price. All right, so like our example up here, if we have our overall selling price of $1,250 and we knew it cost us $1,000 to do this job, and usually where you're going to use margin when you have an estimate. Okay, so we know what the cost is going to be right here, and we know our goal is going to be 20%. So we take our cost here, our selling price minus the cost. Okay, that's going to be our net cost there. And that's $250 divided by $1,250. That's our total selling price there. Times 100, that's going to be a 20% margin. Okay, so notice margin is going to be slightly lower than markup because we're taking what we're actually making divided by the total selling price. Okay, so that's going to be the difference between markup and margin. Usually you'll use margin when your office has some sales goals here. Okay, they got some goals they want to hit, and that's going to be deal with the gross profit margin. They want to see how profitable they are as far as their profit to the total price of the job. Okay, so they use that at 20% on this one. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about some modern tools over here. So when I started estimating in 2003, which was a very long time ago, we were using Excel. All right. So they didn't have like a lot of fancy software when I was first starting, but today they got tons of different tools. Maybe your vendor or your company has their own tool. A lot of companies do. They might even have their own Excel spreadsheets that, have all these different categories on it and things like that. You can also buy, things like Bluebeam, D-Tools, Conest, and all these other ones here. Just Google BAS controls estimating software. You can pick up things that'll help you do that for you. And it's really just like there's wizards on it, and it makes it so easy to do. So you can actually learn a lot just by using some of this software as you're going through it. Okay. CRM integration. So that's customer relationship manager. I believe that's what it stands for. And you're just taking data from your customers to forecast the win probability. Maybe you're seeing how many times they bought stuff from you in the past, how much they bought it for, what margin they're buying it at. And then you could adjust your pricing accordingly and things like that. So CRM integration can help you with that data that's already there. Also, AI helpers. Okay, so we live in a world of new technology, artificial intelligence. We've all seen ChatGPT or Copilot. These can help build scope summaries. Okay, check drawing terminology or draft subcontractor requests for quotes, RFQs. All right, so these can all be used to save you a ton of time in typing out, scope of works, things like that, content development. One thing that I will add, if you're using AI, make sure you double check it. Don't just trust AI 100%, even though it is pretty accurate, but there you will catch some things that are off. So if you're using any kind of AI, make sure you double check it before you send it out, because you could lose some money there, or you could price yourself out of a job. Vendor support, get early pricing, lead times, and alternates. So that's another thing too. If you suspect that your customer might go out of budget, you might want to think about doing some alternate ads and things like that. Vendor support, get some good pricing. The earlier you get your pricing, the more you can negotiate. Maybe you're trying to get a mass quantity of valves or something like that, and you want to try to get a better margin or a better multiplier. You can do that. You can negotiate that. If you try to get it at the last minute, you got to use whatever you normally get. And then capture history. This is what I was talking about. Interview your in-house team. That's very important for hours, rework, overages, for future estimate accuracy. So capture that data, and you could do that with these tools here to see how long it maybe took to do an air handler and what compared to what was estimated. Okay, so this historical data really is gold, and that's what's going to help your office get better, number one, obviously, and number two, help your estimates become more accurate. Okay, we'll talk about some of the pitfalls and blind spots that I've kind of gone through. I'm going to kind of try to wrap this up. I'm running low on time here. So some common underestimations are owner training hours. A lot of times people leave this out, and you got to make sure that you read what's in the spec or what the customer's expecting on a negotiated retrofit job. So make sure you train your customers. Make sure you have some time in there for IT setup in our IP world that we live in now. Make sure we understand, open up those firewalls, get with the IT professionals at your customer job site. Make sure that you can access the system, okay? If there's a domain name server, make sure you know what that is and you're allowed to get in through that port. And then also certificates. If there's any certificates they need to set up for you to get in to access the system from your laptop or a VPN, make sure that we have that set up too as well. Front-end definitions, server versus license versus hosted. So there could be these three different definitions there. Watch out for low bid or no shows. All right. This could be like an electrical subcontractor. All right. One time I had a subcontractor do that to me once, and then you got to go to the second bid. The second bid's probably maybe going to be a little bit higher, or it could be extremely low and more risky. So just make sure for low bid or no shows on your electrical subcontractor. Outdated submittal parts. Okay, this can be rejected by the design engineer if the parts don't match what they're expecting, or they go to research it and they don't see it. Then you'll get it rejected, and then you'll have to redo the submittal again. We don't want to have to do that. That counts more time on our estimate. And then unescalated material costs. Make sure within your estimator tool you stay up to date, with all your materials, sensors, valves, whatever it is. Make sure that's up to date. Graphics. Okay, obviously, depending on the project, what I used to do in my templates for every piece of equipment, like if it's an air handler, a VAV box, I used to have a little bit of time for graphics, even if it's just like a quarter of an hour or, 15 minutes or 5 minutes, per VAV box to reference that on a floor plan or whatever. That all takes time, so that it needs to be counted. So just 3 air handlers doesn't mean 3 graphics. Those air handlers might have to be on a menu page with a button, then reference it to a standard graphic or something like that, or a custom graphic. So make sure they're aware of that. And the owner may expect a full user interface with navigation and alarms like we have here. So make sure you understand what the customer's expecting if it's a retrofit, and then also make sure we go by the requirements on the plans and specs. So pro tip, use demos and screenshots for the approval trail, maybe even in the submittal. If you have the graphics already done, go ahead and do a screenshot of each one of those and put it in the submittal, or put it on a different document just to show them, just to make sure it gets approved. That way you're doing all your homework up front, and you're covering yourself for some issues that could cost you more time down the road. So you could do that too as well. Scope control and change management. So, we need to, these can be pretty sneaky. Scope control, scope creep. That's when things come about that we didn't see before. So you need to think like a project manager from the start as an estimator. You need to be aware of what the project manager is going to have to go through. Okay. So let's see here. Build a change log during estimating. All right. So there might be some kind of like change orders or something like that you need to be aware of. Clearly tagged, assumed by others. Okay. So in the bottom of my estimates, I'd always say exclusions, or, this could be assumed to be by others. Sometimes that can sneak up and bite you there. Provide pricing for alternates up front. Make sure your customer is aware of the alternates up front. Don't just surprise them at the end and just give them an alternate and they think that they should have had this in the base bid. Include scope clarification sheet. Okay, so if there's some vague items, like if you're going to assume that open your communication cable can be not conduit in concealed areas, make sure you note that on there. Okay, and conduit and exposed if it's not written in the sequence or in the specs. Also include what's not included. We kind of talked about that. Conduit, installation of valves, okay, or maybe graphics or whatever. Now, how the estimating can impact execution. There's a few things here. So labor overestimation, like we talked about before. If you just throw out a number on there to be safe, you could lose the job because you're going to overestimate yourself out of the job. You could underestimate labor. This is a big thing. Like a lot of people do is they underestimate labor in a lot of different categories. Make sure you have labor estimated for everybody that's going to touch that job. Okay, so the PM, the project administrator, if you have an administrator doing it, the technician, the engineer. Okay, maybe you have a graphics department that does your graphics. Make sure all those areas are covered and kind of get a feel for how long it takes them to do each task. How long does it take them to do an air handler graphic? How long does it take them to do a floor plan or whatever? So make sure you interview them and get some labor estimates there. Also missed panels. Sometimes if a controller is supposed to be in a control panel, you missed it. That's another item that you're going to have the electrician install and cover the material. Cable paths, okay? Maybe we don't understand the cable path on a network. Breakers, maybe the break, you don't have enough breakers, things like that. Your estimate becomes the project DNA. Okay. Follow up with PM's post-job to learn. So I keep saying that over and over again. See how your estimate came in. See where you went wrong. When I first started estimating, that was my biggest fear, was going to my boss and seeing what I missed. But really, it's not a bad thing. That's how you get better. And I learned that over time. I wanted to know where I missed at. That's how I got within 2% accuracy from the actuals, consistently every year, because I learned from my mistakes. And that's something that is very valuable to do. And get with your PMs, and your PM would be glad to share where you missed, trust me. So don't worry about that. They'll tell you where you missed on the labor and material, usually, hopefully in a nice way. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and conclude this. So we talked about estimating, kind of if I had to sum it up, it's more like a technical type of deal. We got to know the technical side of it, obviously. We got to know the management. Think like a project management and what it's going to take to manage that project. Okay. And it's also a psychological game too. We got to kind of see who's going to be the people we're delivering this to. We're got to visualize what this project looks like in our head, especially on a retrofit project when you don't have a plan and spec as a map. So it's a psychological game. We got to make sure we stay within budget. We got to know who our competitors are. Okay. We got to know who our customer is and what they're expecting. So you shape the outcomes, not just price jobs. Okay. So we're shaping what that building's going to look like, next year, 5 years, 10 years down the road, not just pricing jobs. So we need to make sure we cover everything that the design engineer designed and the customer's expecting, because they got to live in that building after we start it up and leave it after warranty. Always ask these things here. What's hidden in the spec? Okay. Is there anything hidden in the spec? Is there any request for information that I need to send the engineer or the owner? Or request for clarification, something that's vague, okay? And what can I neutralize early? What can we make sure we get some confirmation about an issue that's in the plans and specs? And how can I win and still deliver? This is the biggest thing of competitiveness as an estimator. And we don't just want to be conservative and safe so we don't go under budget, but we need to be competitive. So we need to make sure we get our estimates very tight. Because if we don't win estimates, then obviously we're not going to have a job because we're not going to win any controls jobs. So we got to be competitive because we're competing against other controls companies. So that's a good question you need to keep in your mind. How can I win, but still deliver, still stay on budget within 2% accuracy, or whatever your goal is in your office? Okay. All right, so that pretty much covers what we're going to go over today. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. And thank you very much for listening to this Smart Buildings Academy podcast. We hope you learned a lot from this episode. If you found this episode valuable, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or Spotify. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like, comment, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. As always, this will be available on our website at podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com/502. Thank you, and we'll talk to you all again next week. Take care and goodbye.